Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. Now, we've done a couple greatest recordings ever with the symphony featured because there have been many great recordings of this symphony. There really have. But this is one that I find particularly interesting, and it is unquestionably a great recording. It is, are you ready? Leonard Bernstein with the Vienna Philharmonic. Yes, on Deutsche Grammophon. Now, do you remember when Bernstein's Beethoven cycle on Deutsche Grammophon came out? It was at the start of his relationship with that label. And he was rebranding himself, as he was the hotshot, young, sexy American, emotionally volatile, that kind of guy. But for Deutsche Grammophon, the yellow label, which in those days still had a brand image, doesn't anymore, but in those days it did, as the label of German standard repertoire and a certain quality image. So there was a picture of him, with his gray hair, looking now like a grand old man on the cover of this thing. And he was in direct competition with Karajan 1977, which was, sort of the one everybody was pushing then, because Karajan 1963 was out of print at the time. And so, those were like the big competing Beethoven cycles. They really were. And it was exciting. It was exciting to hear this new, really fine. It was an excellent Beethoven cycle, really probably the best one that Vienna had done since Schmidt-Isserstedt, which also was difficult to find because Schmidt-Isserstedt was not a big name. And Bernstein's performances were, Bernstein. They were more volatile, but very, very much in the spirit of Beethoven. They had the right drama, the momentum, the muscularity. Really, it's really a very consistent cycle, consistently excellent. And the seventh was arguably the highlight. Bernstein had a special relationship to the Seventh Symphony. He recorded it for Columbia a couple of times with the New York Phil, let's not forget. And you could tell how much he enjoyed this symphony and the scherzo with that New York Philharmonic recording, and also here in Vienna, that quirky horn parts, ya da da, in the trio, when the horns are going, strange noises, and he had a gourmand's relish, I think, for the strange little nooks and crannies of the piece, but of course without missing the big picture. It was exciting, and it was very well played. And when he came to do it with Vienna, he had lost none of those qualities. It wasn't slower, it wasn't heavier, it wasn't more sententious, he wasn't trying to make points in that sense. It was just as muscular and exciting, but it was the Vienna Philharmonic. It had gorgeous string playing, really, really beautiful performance, burnished horns. All the things that we look for in the Vienna Philharmonic. But here's the thing. In the intervening years, the intervening centuries, it seems like it really does. First, we had all the period instrument people schlepping along. And I have to say, there have been very few period instrument recordings of the Seventh Symphony that I find totally satisfying. It's a symphony that's written for a modern orchestra. It really is like a lot of Haydn's symphonies are. Actually, I think all of Haydn's symphonies are, but the music requires a solidity, a dynamic range. If you're using period style on modern instruments, as someone like Charles Mackerras does, well, that's okay. You can get away with that. But these tiny little pint-sized period instrument ensembles very, very rarely give the music enough weight. And I don't mean weight in terms of, heavy slowness. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about impact, dynamic range, all of these things, rhythmic force. Sheer force, drive. Because this is a symphony which, more than anything else, as we all know, is about rhythm. I mean, Wagner called it the apotheosis of the dance, which I think is absolutely stupid. It doesn't do anything like that. That's okay. But he got the fact that it has rhythm, which is one thing that Wagner never has. So he understood that much. And we've got this wonderful, wonderful performance with one of the world's great orchestras that was forgotten. It wasn't, great music making doesn't date. It doesn't. It shouldn't. Let's put it that way. Whether it's in the most up-to-date idiomatic style, whether it's in keeping with current theories about performance practice, well, you can argue that if you want. But a great conductor, a genius, really, a conductor with one of the world's greatest orchestras that has an impeccable pedigree in that music, where everyone is operating with the same degree of understanding and supreme musicianship, it doesn't date. And so, there have been a bazillion Beethoven cycles on modern instruments, a bazillion on period instruments, but this is still one of the great Beethoven sevenths, without question, one of the greatest recordings ever. And nothing is going to change that. And for those folks who, whenever I talk about these great performances, I usually get a bunch of people who talk about, oh, it's too slow, it's too heavy, it's wrong. It's not wrong. It's really not wrong. I'm telling you, it's not wrong. The differences between this and a period instrument performance are of minimal significance. The timbre of the instruments, okay, a little bit. Sometimes the tempos are in keeping with Beethoven's metronome markings. Big mistake, by the way, especially in this symphony. It really is. This is music that tells you how it wants to go, and it doesn't mean anything. What we want to hear is the expressive immediacy, the rhythmic acuity, the power of the tutis, the brilliance of the horns, all of these things. And that, however it's realized, whatever kind of instrument, whatever approach you use, greatness is its own justification. If they do it, they do it. And if they don't, they don't. And no theory of performance is going to change that basic fact. The musical issues are universal and have absolutely nothing to do with whatever style du jour the players may be using. Either you get Beethoven or you don't get Beethoven. Bernstein got Beethoven, and he got the seventh more than perhaps any other Beethoven symphony, or best of all, in my view, in any case. So I think this is one of the greatest recordings ever. And if you haven't heard it in a while, you owe it to yourself. Give it a listen with fresh ears. Forget who it is, forget what it is. Just play it and revel in what is, without doubt, an absolutely glorious performance. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.